I'm going to talk to you about continuous user research and the impact it's had on my work. And yeah, just to give you a little introduction about myself, you may have noticed from my accent that I'm British. I was born in Southeast London. As you can see, this is the 51 bus, which serves the Southeast, and I spent a lot of time on there when I was growing up. I've also lived in Nottingham in the UK, where the Robin Hood legend is from. And currently I'm living in Berlin. I've been here 10 years, so it really feels like home. And as Hannah mentioned, I've been a designer for many years actually, but not with tech products. So I started out as a fashion and textile designer for many years. And then around 2019, I had a career change via a boot camp. And so this is kind of giving you a background as how I ended up trying to improve my research practice. So yeah, then currently I'm working for an insurtech in Berlin, a Berlin-based insurance company. So how did I end up finding continuous user research and following this path? So I'll tell you my story. Basically, yeah, once I'd done the boot camp and I'd done a couple of jobs, they mostly had a UI focus, I would say, because that seemed like kind of the logical transition from what I was doing in fashion. It was quite visual. And then I found myself working at an insurance company and a tech company, both two in one. And it's actually quite a complex domain and totally different to anything I'd done before. And the products I was working with, so it was customer-facing products where customers are buying the insurance and the services around that. And it was also a lot of internal things that we were building because in an insurance company, there's a lot of specialists who work in there, and there's a lot of complexity to it. So what we were designing was kind of these products to streamline these internal processes and automate some of them. So coming into this very complex world, it was quite intimidating and a little bit overwhelming. And I would say another thing is, when I started, I was the only UX designer in the company. Luckily now there's another one, so that's really lovely. But yeah, that's why I've mentioned that I had a little bit of imposter syndrome, because it was such a new domain of so much information, and I was becoming involved in these design meetings and ideating products. And I realized I really needed to have a deeper understanding of our customers and these different users that we were trying to cater for. And people were asking me, we're having a problem here, we're having a problem with this. What's going on? Can you tell us? And I was this kind of UI UX guru, but I kind of felt like, you know what, I really need to sort out my research skills if I'm going to do my job properly. So yeah, and it's basically brought home to me that research really is the backbone of UX, and to be a good UX designer, you really have to master research. So, and the final point I've got here is that it's actually a really fun side of my job. It was something, yeah, because like I said, I was working more with UI, and then I discovered this other side of my job that I started to really enjoy. And yeah, to begin with, I was teaching myself. I was looking at YouTube videos and books, and there's a lot of great material out there. But what I really was looking for was some kind of framework and structure, so that I kind of had a bit of a guide and I could go to my team and feel a lot more confident with what I was telling them, and more persuasive, and come to them with more compelling data and more compelling results. So yeah, and the other thing was, as the only UX designer, I was kind of lacking this peer feedback. I had a really fantastic product team in my company, and they're very supportive, but having peer feedback is extremely valuable. So this is kind of what led me to the continuous research course with the Fountain Institute. So now I'm going to tell you how it worked out for me. So that was actually around this time last year, I took that course. So just to give you a very brief introduction into what continuous research is, there's actually a lot to it, but I'm just going to give you the main points. So it's weekly exploratory research activities to build a comprehensive picture of the customer in real time and to de-risk our design work. So that's a quote from Jeff at the Fountain Institute. And I think that kind of sums it up really well. It's about kind of being proactive with your research around your products and your customers so that you can stay really current and you build this really good understanding around them in real time. And there's 3 pillars to continuous research. It has to be quick, so quite manageable within your weekly schedule. It's not about, a big research project that you have to wait till it's finished. It's kind of little and often throughout the week, so you can generate insights and act on them much more quickly in a more agile way. And then collaborative, this is really key and really important. It's something, the activities that you have within your weekly schedule, they should be things that other people, other stakeholders, other members of the product team can join in with. And this really fosters engagement. And the final thing is accessible. So when you get your data, it's something that everyone can find and everyone can check. And accessible in terms of everyone can drop in to the research activities you're doing and they can contribute. So yeah, that's a very brief introduction. And just to give you an idea of what it could look like. So this could be a structure that you fit into your week with moderated and unmoderated research activities, but you can definitely adapt it to suit you. So if you're a UI UX designer like me and UX research is not actually the full thing that you do all day, because you can be a specialized UX researcher, this is kind of a nice way to kind of fit these things into your week. And the other thing is, so the main concept around continuous research is that it's proactive, and it doesn't have to be around something that someone's asked for or a specific project. It's a way of kind of like checking in with your product and your users, and then you see what insights and opportunities come out of that. But I found that also for me, it can also fit in when you do have like a specific project in mind, and that can kind of guide the direction of some of your research, and in that way you can kind of build up this bank of knowledge around a project that is coming up soon, and then you're ready for it once it starts. So that was something that I found. So I'm going to go into some key discovery techniques. So there's actually a lot, and in the course we covered a lot of different things you can do, but I'm just going to talk about the ones that I found were super impactful for me and I keep coming back to. So the first one is the discovery interview. So this one is basically it's kind of a very open-ended interview technique, and it's kind of nice when you come up with a question like, can you describe your experience around such and such? And it's basically not asking a user, what they think about something. It's basically investigating like a real experience that they've had with a product. So it's not asking, oh, what would you do in this situation? What do you think about this? You're kind of exploring something that's really happened to them, because what users actually do can be quite different from what they say. So yeah, this is a way to kind of like really find out details of what are their needs and pain points around something. Yeah, so how did I harness the power of the discovery interview? So this is something that I did when we had this challenge around making claims through our customer portal. So basically, we found that actually a lot of people were trying to make their claims through email. And this could be a bit problematic for us because that causes a lot of manual work and it takes a lot longer. So the challenge was to find out, okay, why is this happening? And also, potentially redesign our experience so that we can foster this kind of behavior. And yeah, basically I recruited, well, actually, this was specifically about pet health insurance. So I recruited 10 users who matched our profile. And this was the question that I prompted everything. So tell me about the last time you made a claim. So it's super open, and they're describing something that actually happened to them. And it could be a good experience, it could be a bad experience, and you really kind of let it play out. And from that, you can really learn a lot. What went well from them, what didn't, what makes a good experience for them. And you can really mine it for insights and opportunities for your product. So yeah, that was a really good one. Another one that I has had a really huge impact for me is the discovery walkthrough. So just to introduce you to this, basically you observe a user using your product in near to real conditions, but it could also be you're observing a user as they're walking through a competitive product, or it could even be completing a task that there isn't a product for yet, perhaps, but it's something that you intend to design. So you're kind of observing the process that you're trying to make a solution for, and it's not necessarily using a tech product yet. So yeah, so my example here is, yeah, basically we were trying to design a product that was going to help our internal users around the task of building an insurance product. And this is, it's actually an extremely complex process, and there's a lot of specialists involved with pricing, for example. And yeah, when we first started the meetings to kind of kick off this project, I kind of realized this is a kind of a really complex thing that we're trying to handle, and I'm not really bringing the user's perspective to this meeting. So basically then I decided to conduct a walkthrough with a specialist who builds this insurance product, and I walked through his whole process end to end. And then I kind of, it was really crystal clear to me, okay, what are his needs? Where are the pain points? And I actually had a really good understanding of my task after that. And I have to say, yeah, it's when I was being onboarded into this company, and like I said, insurance there's a lot. It's very complex and overwhelming. And when you are being onboarded into all these processes and all these different departments and specializations, it kind of goes over your head. But actually sitting with somebody while they go through their process, then you really understand it, you really get it, and you have a lot of empathy for them. So this was quite transformative for me, I would say. Like, it helped me to really understand like my own industry that I was now in. Yeah, and it's also good for networking, because I found that colleagues are super happy to, share with you what they do day to day, and to, show their expertise. So it's, when you're designing something for internal stakeholders, that's a really good way to go. And it's kind of, you've got the luxury of asking them lots of silly questions, and they quite enjoy it. So that's good. And also I would say this is a really nice activity to do as in a product trio. So very briefly, if you're not familiar with the concept of the product trio, it's a designer, a developer, and a product person. And it's basically a method of working together that's a little bit more agile. So instead of having every single person involved in every meeting, you have like those three specializations and those three perspectives to kind of help a project move a little bit quicker. And you can do ideation meetings together. And actually we've tried some walkthroughs in our product trio. So we were kind of discussing a certain problem we were trying to solve, and there were a lot of unanswered questions. So we just said, oh, let's get in so-and-so, and we can walk through her process. And then it really helps us to understand, what she needs. And having not only a design person, but also a technical person and somebody with a business perspective is really good, because they can come up with questions that I might not come up with on my own. And then we kind of cover all the needs there. So yeah, I really love that process. Okay, next, collaborative synthesis. So this is where you gather all of your research data and you kind of sort it collaboratively with your stakeholders and key people who were involved in finding like the solution to the problem. So how did I harness the power of collaborative synthesis? So once I gathered all this data around how we could improve the claims experience, and we had data from these interviews, we had analytics from our product, we had user testing, and we gathered the team together to look at this data, even bring their own data to the table as well. And then we synthesize it. So we look for patterns, and that way you kind of mitigate personal bias, because sometimes when you're looking at your research and you're really into it, you kind of get really excited and attached to a certain solution that you think is the one. But when you have other people with their own expertise and backgrounds coming into the picture, then it helps you to see things from their perspective, and there might be alternative solutions that are actually more suitable. So this is actually a really enjoyable process, and it gets people really engaged, and they feel like they've had a part in it, and they're kind of more behind the solution that you find if they've had involvement in finding that solution. So also, as a part of this collaborative synthesis, on the course we learned about the opportunity solution tree. So this is something that is talked about in this lovely book, Discovery Habits, by Teresa Torres. And it's basically, it visualizes a process where you're aligning to your desired business outcome. You've got your opportunities that you've gleaned from your research and your data, and you kind of structure them and prioritize them. And from that, you can generate lots of solutions. And then the next stage is experimentation, but I won't go into that at this point. So how did I harness the power of the opportunity solution tree? Well, so I tried this first of all with my product team. So there's all of the POs. There's a lot of POs in my company somehow. And we kind of experimented with it, with the data that we had around the claims process. And the first time I did it, I mean, there's a lot of detail to this technique that Teresa Torres describes. So it's kind of this first go, we were trying to get our heads around the concepts, we were reframing the problems. So that was an interesting exercise. But then after that, myself and one of the product owners, then we kind of decided to take this technique and use it with some stakeholders, the operations team, who actually handle the claims. And we kind of simplified it a lot. So our process there was, so I brought my user research, the product owner brought some data, and the stakeholders, the operations team, also brought their input, like their experiences directly with customers. So then we had all of these three perspectives. We sorted the data, clustered it, so we found the key opportunities, and then we individually brainstormed the solutions. And I think it worked really well. We tried to keep it kind of simple and easy to understand. And then from that, we found some actionable solutions that we then, and we voted them. So it was kind of a very democratic process, and I think everyone enjoyed it. So it's a really great way to get everyone's perspective, everyone's expertise into the project, their creativity when they're kind of thinking of solutions. It's quite fun, and then you get a lot more buy-in. So that worked really well for me. Okay, and then the final thing I want to talk about is research repositories. So now you've got all this data from your continuous research process. What are you going to do with it? It's really important actually to store it in a way that people can access it. You can connect related data points, and you don't lose it. So you're not repeating the same research, and things don't get lost. So the knowledge doesn't get lost. So it's quite key to really organize that in a nice way. And yeah, in my case, so I did notice some pain points in my company, in my organization around research, and kind of we did have a lot of information, a lot of past projects and data, and some of it was people remembered from the past, but it wasn't so easy to search for. And also I have to say, I kind of like to use Miro a lot, so I kind of dump all my research there and I'll play around with it. And Miro is actually a really fantastic tool for organizing your thoughts and for collaborating, but actually they're not very intelligible necessarily to people who don't use Miro regularly, who weren't involved in a certain meeting. So yeah, I basically carried out a research project about research in my company, and did some discovery interviews with people who use the research. And what I found was that the decision makers in my company, they really wanted kind of a really concise summary with the outcomes of the research. And yeah, as I mentioned, they're not necessarily always comfortable using Miro. So I had to find a tool that everyone in the company is very uses regularly and is very familiar with. So in our case, it had to be Confluence. So I have to say, like, the research repository in my company is kind of a work in progress, and I have to now see how is our solution performing. So I have to continue my research. So yeah, that's how that worked out. And yeah, so I will tell you also how I sold it to my organization. So how did I explain this to my team, explain the benefits and why we should invest more time in research and why continuous research is a good idea for us. So first of all, I presented it to my team lead. What is it and why should we adopt it? And for us, I did find that, okay, so you get given a project and then it's kind of like a big hill you have to climb, and then you go to the end. But if we kind of take on this continuous approach, then we're already building up the knowledge as we go along, kind of organically. And yeah, we have like this general foundation, this knowledge about our products and about our users. So when something comes along, we're kind of ready, and we can act on it much more quickly. So it's not like we have to wait for this huge thing to come to fruition. And in addition to that, I set up bi-weekly knowledge sharing sessions in the product team. And so we have like a weekly product catch up, and every other week we tag on this little 15-minute session where you might explain a certain concept to each other. So here I could, for example, talk about the product trio or discovery interviews, and then we have a chance to kind of discuss it and think about how we would apply it to our work. And another thing is in our product team, we kind of have like maybe twice a year or more a product day. So we kind of organize workshops around a particular theme, and then we get to try out some of these concepts and think about, how could this work for our next project. So that's been how I've been trying to spread the word about continuous. So what was the impact that it had on my team and on our product? So yeah, like I say, you're always prepared. So you've always got this bank of knowledge and insights that are continuously being generated. So if somebody comes up with a project that, next quarter we've got to work on this, you kind of already have like a few things that you can work with, and it kind of, and then okay, we need to focus on this, so we'll drill deeper in this area, but you already have like a foundation there to work with. So you feel a lot more prepared. It's not like you're starting from nothing. I would say also my product team has adopted a lot of these collaborative processes as a mainstay of how we work. So definitely the product trio, which Teresa Torres talks about a lot, and the opportunity solution framework, and walkthroughs and interviews are definitely things that our team now is more really comfortable with, and we use them quite a lot. Certainly, visibility of design, I would say, is improved, because when you have these collaborative activities where you involve different people, stakeholders, developers, and then they kind of illustrates to them the impact and the power of good design. And they're also there when you kind of find these insights, these aha moments, so they get kind of excited about that. And one thing, I'm sure probably all of us at some point have had the experience where people hear the word design and they think, it's about making things pretty. That definitely has happened to me, and it's kind of fine. I mean, if people don't know, they don't know, but when you kind of involve them in these activities, they really see the value of research, and they see that there's definitely more to it. So that has definitely been an advantage. So like I say, stakeholders get really more invested in it if they've been part of the process of finding the solution, and the result is that things become a lot more user focused. So now I'm able to bring the perspective of the user to my ideation meetings, because I'm a lot more current with what our users need. So, and for me personally, how has it changed things for me? So I would say, having this continuous approach, it's a really good framework to just keep growing and keep finding out more, and basically build your expertise. And it's something that you do in this regular rhythm, so you kind of have this feeling of progress. So I feel like I know what I'm talking about a bit more now. And doing it continuously makes you better at it. So if you're kind of using these techniques regularly, then you become good at interviews, good at surveys, because it's not like, when was the last time I did that? How do I do that again? You're just like constantly practicing. I think I mentioned before about networking with my organization and actually understanding this kind of huge, complicated beast of insurance. So that feels quite empowering. So that's really boosted my confidence. So I feel like from becoming a better researcher, I've definitely become a lot more confident as a designer. So that's it really. So I hope that my story has helped you in some way and perhaps inspired you in some way too. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for sharing your experiences and kind of what's going on. Seeing some nice claps and emojis here in the audience as well. We have some questions that are coming in. How long do product walkthroughs take?
So in my case, we were trying to find a solution for this quite complex process that actually it normally takes, as I found out, if this guy was building an insurance product just focusing on this one thing, it would take him a month, because there's a lot to it. So he was walking through his process, but just kind of like really talking through it and the tools that he's using and his thought process. And that took about 45 minutes. So that's just one example. So it really depends. It depends on the process. But it's kind of nice to spend time on it and just have, as they're doing it, you can ask questions. And
I'm also curious, because you said that you also bring in your product trio to do some of these walkthroughs. Do you differentiate between like somebody's going to lead with a question, somebody else is going to note take, or like how do you kind of divvy up the responsibilities when you're bringing in other people for these walkthroughs?
So actually, mostly when we've been doing it, it's been quite like informal, and there's even times where it's just like we're just talking and we're like, let's just get that person in, and they happen to be available, so it's not really planned. But I mean, I always take notes. And then but that's a good question. I mean, it's, if we had the time to plan it and kind of were a bit more systematic about putting it into our process, then maybe we could allocate roles in that way. And I guess there can be an advantage in that if a non-designer was taking notes, for example. Then maybe they would think about it in a different way.
Yeah, but it's kind of nice to hear that it's also just like it's something that you do more sporadic, or like there's not so much, you feel like the capability to just kind of like jump into it in those moments as well. So it doesn't have to be completely planned out, let's say, or
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of nice that the team has that in their head that we can get someone to do that for us. And yeah, it doesn't have to be like, oh, we plan it out in advance.
Mhm. Okay. I'm gonna move to this other question. Um, here, there we go. Just trying to do a couple things at once. So they were talking about, oh, sorry. Well, we'll take this question. This is not the one I thought was gonna pop up, but have you put any frameworks in place to measure the impact that the research has had on the business metrics at all? Or is that has been any sort of questions that maybe came up from people at your company?
Yeah. So measure the impact on business metrics. Yeah. So, I mean, we have been talking about metrics, success metrics in my company. But to be honest, we haven't connected it directly to research. It's more, yeah, it's more like, so, I mean, I also did the product experiments course with the Fountain Institute, so I learned about metrics. But that's the thing. When you're trying to measure the impact of your research, it can be kind of fuzzy because the research part, it sort of informs your solution. So you're kind of more measuring the metrics of like how that solution performs. So it's not always easy to like put a number on it, if you see what I mean.
Mhm.
But I'm now wondering if there is a way, because that would be interesting. Um, yeah, that's something to think about.
I
But yeah,
actually, I
certainly in
wish I
my
could remember the name of the woman, but this is actually a post I saw on LinkedIn today that was like, how do you measure the impact of research from the business? Like, what metrics can you use? Not actually like measuring the impact of the product, but on that. I'll find it and send it
yeah, I
in the
wonder if
chat for you guys. But it was really interesting of somebody trying to like take a stab at like how do we measure the impact? Like what kind of metrics can we use to measure the impact? And there was like, are we reaching our goals? Like, are we yeah, I can't remember. I wish I could. But
yeah, no, but that is a very interesting question and a good question. So I wonder if yeah, there's something like, okay, this project had research and this one didn't. Or yeah, we spent X amount of time on research for this. But I mean it's yeah, it's something to think about. Interesting one.
yeah. So back to the questions again, a little bit on the idea of the methods. Could you share any more details on how you ran some of the collaborative synthesis? Any specific frameworks or approaches you might have used?
Oh yeah, so collaborative synthesis. So basically, yeah, on the course we went into a lot of detail about that. And yeah, we started off with the method we used was kind of like break things down into data points. So these could be like quotes or insights. Yeah, just very kind of like I don't know, I guess concisely worded phrases, and then clustering them into themes. And then from the themes, we kind of worked out what the need was behind each insight. Okay, it was complicated. There was a lot to it. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But yeah, I would say like when we did it with non-product people, because I guess product people have a lot of these kind of concepts and techniques in mind, and okay, how do we frame this problem? What point of view should we be looking at? And like how do we word it? And we go into a lot of details about that to try and like really analyze it in a lot of depth. So yeah, but when we took this to kind of non-product people, we had to kind of adapt it a little bit and yeah, just make it a little bit easier to work with and within a certain time frame. So it was more like, yeah, we got the data points and summarized them, clustered them, found the opportunities, and then brainstormed. So I feel like there's a lot of different things you can do, and it's more about just yeah, finding about what works for your audience and it can also depend on the project. Yeah, like how much detail do you need to go into? How big is the project? Are you zooming in onto kind of a small part of it? And how much time does that require? So there's a lot to think about.
And do you mind telling us a little bit about like what role you have in that? Are you facilitating these conversations? Are you running it? Like, yeah, what kind of role do you take in these collaborative sessions?
Yeah, so like when I first tried it out with my product team, I was definitely doing all the facilitating because I really wanted to, get their feedback on all of these new concepts I was learning. And then actually when we did it with our like non-product stakeholders, that the product owner kind of was more on the facilitating side. And I think that was kind of a good way to do it because he had obviously learned from me, like all of the more detailed way of doing it. And then he was like, okay, we're just going to take this bit and this bit and see how that works. So I was then more kind of participating and then just prompting and questioning a little bit. So I think it's definitely a facilitation opportunity for a designer, but it kind of can be nice to give up that mantle a little bit and let the product owner play with it a bit. So that was, yeah, because they have a different perspective and they on the business needs, and it was an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. This question, let's see if it pops up here. Yeah, you talked a little bit about this like research repository, but this question also is asking a little bit more about like the documentation of it, not just the research repository. How do you think, like, so what tools do you use to document the whole process? And as I said, the second part, you kind of talked about the research repository aspect of it, but like maybe talk a little bit about the documentation and how that builds into the research repository that you're building at the moment or trying to build, let's say.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Confluence is like our main documentation tool at my company, and what the challenges we have there is kind of making it searchable, connecting the information and having it really well organized. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely tools out there that are specifically designed to be research repositories. So at this time, we decided not to go in that direction. So we're kind of trying to adapt the tools that we have. And I've definitely seen a lot of inspiration online of people using Jira and Confluence to document their insights. But currently, the way I've been doing it is Miro, because it's like such a visual tool and it's so easy collaboration and the designers. And then yeah, the challenge is, okay, I've got to translate it into Confluence where like the C-level is going to go and look at it. So how do I put the most pertinent information for them so they can make the decision on it? And if they want to find out more about the process, then they can look here and here, but really what they want is like a summary of how it went. So yeah, I've just been kind of playing around with that solution, and yeah, I mean, it has its challenges. It's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear though that like when you really think about like who is going to look at this and what is the purpose, what do they need to know from that? And it's kind of like that high level. It's really nice to kind of see that perspective, and we can get really geeky and nerdy about all the little things that go into it, but how do we make it accessible? How do we get people who like will really use it and do something with it as well? I feel like it wouldn't be something about user research without talking about finding users. And so we have a couple of questions in that kind of realm as well. So any tips on recruiting users for ongoing research if unmonitored testing tools like user testing aren't an option as well? Or maybe you could talk a little bit, about
if unmoderated testing tools aren't an option. Okay. I mean, yeah, so for those discovery interviews, I did use like the rapid-user-testing.com, which is a German company where you can recruit users. But actually, you can do a lot of testing with internal users. People are often quite willing to help out with that. Of course, you have to be careful of bias there, because, I mean, depending on what department the tester is coming from, they might already have quite a lot of knowledge of your product. So if I'm doing that, maybe I would go for somebody who's in HR or marketing, and they don't really work with the product every day, so they're a bit more fresh. So that's kind of like a quick and dirty way of finding people. There's, obviously people in your network, and I mean, other ways of recruiting people. So yeah, you can find out. I mean, we kind of cover that in the product experiments course as well. Find out where your users are hanging out. Are there kind of online groups that they're part of? Yeah, like, because we're dealing a lot with pet owners in our company, because we sell pet insurance, we sell bike insurance. Where are these kind of people going to be looking online? And maybe you can reach out to people there, offer incentives. Even on Facebook, you can put out a shout and recruit users through Facebook with a little voucher incentive. If you didn't want to use one of these like platforms where you have to kind of pay quite a bit or pay a subscription, these are different ways you could do it. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult one, and sometimes hard to get into the details when we don't know what the contexts are. But I love some of the suggestions that you're putting out there as well. So thanks for that. We'll have time for one more question before we wrap up. I don't know if I just froze. Nope. Okay. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you think about, like, how do you decide which method to use?
How do you decide which method to use? Wow. I mean, it feels like it depends, but yeah, it really depends on the problem. But I mean, if you're doing something to find out what your users think, then I mean, it feels like the interview is something you can use in so many situations. Yeah, how to decide? I mean, I think that the key is to have like kind of your toolbox ready and get really comfortable with some of these techniques. And yeah, I think if you can have a handful that you use a lot, and when you've tried them out a few times, I feel then you kind of get a feel for what's appropriate at what time. It really depends. It kind of depends if you have a specific thing in mind that you want to find out, or if you just want to kind of gauge what might be some opportunities. Yeah, how are people reacting to this or that? Then you might do a discovery interview or a survey, put a survey out there. So I think, yeah, the key is just really try things out, get confident with them, and then you've kind of got like these, I don't know, 5 or 6 that you always come back to, and you kind of get a feel for what might work best in what situation.
Yeah, I love that answer. Like, it's not always about the plethora of methods out there. There are 100 methods out there, but what are the ones that we can use continuously? I didn't mean that in that way, but like, can we keep going back to, because we're comfortable with them and we know the context that they are appropriate in. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing your experiences with us today. It was really wonderful to hear. So one last non-audible round of applause for Eleanor. Really kind of great job. We're just going to spend the last couple of minutes kind of wrapping up and talking about what some of the next opportunities are with the Fountain Institute. If you are curious and want to dive deeper into some of the methods and stuff, trying to figure out which method to use and why, we do have a couple more spots in our continuous UX research method, which starts on October 2nd. It's the last time we'll be offering this in 2023. So feel free to kind of level up on that if you'd like. Our next meetup is October 18th. And in a similar vein, we're talking about research democratization, myth busting from Kathleen. She's been doing UX research for the last 15 years and really talks about when and where and how to use like this kind of democratization of research, bringing in people, when are the best scenarios to use it and why, depending on your design maturity level, depending on how big your team is, all these kind of stuff. So if you're interested in this, please join us on October 18th. And we have one last workshop next week, which is facilitating a full experience. If you're interested in kind of more about these workshops, that will be on September 27th. So please join me and Rachel Davis if you want to interest in that. Otherwise, a little reminder of our vision here, which is a world that seeks designers for the way that they think and not just what they produce. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks again to Eleanor, and we'll see you next month.